Elder Kuyash didn't hear the wind's roar, nor the ice's crack, but the deep tremor in the ground. Ah, that she felt. It was the signature of a catastrophe. 7 gigantic shadows, white as death, emerged from the blizzard, their hungry eyes fixed on the village's barn. With her hearing long gone, she was the only one to perceive the imminent threat. 7 polar bears, each weighing 2,200 pounds, descending to steal her people's last hope. And what she did next would decide everyone's fate. Despite the title of elder, Kuyash was a woman whose hands, calloused by decades of labor and hunting, now trembled not just from the cold, but from a dull ache settling in her joints, a relentless arthritis that the Yakutian winter made even more cruel. She felt the cold cut her skin and the snow whip her face, but the urgency in her chest was stronger than any discomfort. However, as she prepared for defense, something didn't fit the image of the polar bears that terrorized winter tales. The pattern of vibrations in the ground, the way the snow moved with the beast's passage, was different. It wasn't the heavy, lumbering gait of a bear, but a more agile, more feline movement. Her eyes, though tired by age and the blizzard, caught a glimpse of dark stripes in the gloom, a subtle contrast to the storm's white. They weren't bears, they were tigers. 9 of them, each immense, weighing almost 1,100 pounds of pure hunger and fury. And their target wasn't the grain barn, but the stable where the Yakutian cattle, the true soul of the village, trembled with cold and fear. A wave of icy dread swept through Kuyash, quickly replaced by an iron determination. Siberian tigers were faster, more cunning, and their presence in such numbers and of such monstrous size was something never before seen, even in the oldest legends. The grain barn was important, yes, but the cattle were life, warmth, the currency that kept the village of Ebe breathing. Without them, winter would be a slow, inevitable death sentence. Kuyash pressed her lips together, a deep wrinkle marking her forehead. There was no time for alarms, for shouts she herself wouldn't hear. The village slept, confident in the safety of its ice and wooden walls, unaware that danger lurked so close. With a muffled groan that only she felt in her dry throat, Kuyash moved. Each step was a battle against the pain radiating from her knees and hips. She bent down, picking up her old leather backpack, where she kept the tools that accompanied her on her silent hunts. Snare traps made of reindeer tendons, strong-smelling baits to disorient, and a sharp bone dagger more for cutting ropes than for fighting beasts of that size. Her fingers, swollen and stiff, took a moment to close the clasps, but the muscle memory of a lifetime of hunting guided them. As she crept out of her small cabin, the fine, cutting snow whipped her face, and the wind howled an icy melody she couldn't hear but felt vibrating in her bones. The village was silent, only the smoking chimneys indicating the presence of life. The flickering lights from the few windows were like sleepy eyes, oblivious to the shadow moving stealthily between the houses. Kuyash followed the vibrations in the ground, which were now more intense, a pulsating rhythm of heavy footsteps and deep breaths approaching the stable. Her eyes swept the darkness, searching for any sign of the predators, any movement that might betray their position. The icy air carried a strong, wild scent, a mix of damp fur and frozen earth, which she recognized as the trail of the big cats. The stable, a robust structure of logs and hides, seemed a beacon of hope and vulnerability in the white landscape. Inside, the heads of the Yakutian cattle, with their curved horns and gentle eyes, were lowered, unaware of the approaching terror. Kuyash felt a tightening in her heart. Those animals were more than food. They were companions, symbols of resilience and the promise of a tomorrow. She could not fail. With short breaths and her body protesting every movement, she approached the edge of the village. where the darkness of the forest merged with the blizzard and where the vibrations became a palpable threat. The tigers were there, waiting, and Kuyash, the deaf and aching elder, was the only barrier between life and the annihilation of her people. Kuyash felt the ground vibrate with icy intensity, heavy footsteps and deep breaths approaching the stable. Her eyes, accustomed to the gloom, tried to pierce the darkness, searching for the striped forms moving like ghosts among the frozen bushes. The wild scent, now stronger, confirmed the predator's proximity. She didn't hear the growl, but felt the tension in the air, cold electricity announcing the imminent attack. The elder clasped her hands, feeling the pain of arthritis, but the urgency in her heart superseded discomfort. Eve's life depended on every move. She knelt with difficulty in the snow, her knees cracking. With slow, precise movements, she took the reindeer tendon snares from her backpack. Silent and almost invisible, they were impregnated with a scent that would confuse the tiger's keen senses, guiding them away from the stable. Her mind, sharp as a dagger, revisited the lessons of her ancestors. Brute force was not to be met with more force. Yakutian wisdom taught to use the environment, cunning, patience. Kuyash began to position the traps in a wide semicircle, moving away from the stable towards the forest. Each snare was carefully buried, the snow compacted to hide its presence, leaving a scent trail that the hungry tigers would follow. Her movements were slow, painful, but imbued with unwavering determination. The cutting wind whipped her face, the fine snow covered her white hair, but she barely felt the cold. Her remaining senses were on high alert, the pressure of the ground, the texture of the snow, the subtle scent of the frozen trees. Her eyes, even in the darkness, perceived the minimal differences in the landscape, how the moonlight created deceptive shadows. Suddenly, a stronger, closer vibration. One of the tigers was moving, exploring. Kuyash froze, her body tense as a bowstring. She felt the air vibrate with the beast's passage, an almost imperceptible displacement that her aged body detected. The tiger was a few meters away, an immense striped silhouette moving with terrifying grace, almost merging with the blizzard. Its eyes, glowing like embers in the darkness, swept the area, searching for any sign of life. Kuyash remained motionless, her breath shallow, heart beating a drum rhythm in her chest. She knew that the slightest mistake could cost the cattle their lives and perhaps her own. The tiger passed, its strong, wild scent invading the elder's senses. She waited, uncounting the seconds, until the vibrations indicated the animal had moved away. Then, with an almost inaudible sigh, she resumed her work, her stiff fingers working with renewed urgency. With each trap, Kuyash felt a pang of hope. Not naive, but the conviction that her people's wisdom could prevail against the colossal threat. She wasn't just fighting 9 hungry tigers. She was fighting against despair, against the idea that winter could finally win. The cattle in the stable represented the promise of life and continuity, and Kuyash, the deaf elder, was the guardian of that promise, weaving a silent web of defense in the icy darkness of Yakutia. With each knot tightened, each snare hidden, she felt the strength of her ancestors flow through her veins, a legacy of resilience that the ice could never break. She couldn't hear, but she could feel the village's life pulsating, and it was for that pulsation that she fought. Elder Kuyash, bent against the wind, continued her silent work, every muscle protesting the effort. The arthritis in her fingers seemed to freeze her joints, making each knot a small torment. But the image of her people's sleeping faces, the children nestled in their fur beds, the fragile warmth of the hearths she felt in the icy air, propelled her. She wasn't just setting traps. She was weaving a prayer, an invisible barrier of hope and ancestral wisdom against the ferocity of hunger. The vibrations in the ground intensified again, not from one, but from several tigers. They were beginning to encircle the stable, moving with terrifying coordination. Kuyash felt a shiver down her spine, not of fear, but of recognition. These were no ordinary animals. They were intelligent predators, pushed to their limits by the cold and scarcity. She needed to be more cunning, more patient. Her gaze swept the tree line, searching for the most vulnerable points, the paths the tigers would inevitably choose. With an agility that age and pain tried to steal, Kuyash cast a strong-smelling bait, a mixture of herbs and animal fat, at a strategic distance from the stable, right in the path of one of the strongest vibrations. The goal wasn't to attract, but to divert, to confuse. The tigers, with their keen sense of smell, would be momentarily distracted. Their focus split between the scent of the cattle and the intriguing new fragrance. She observed with her piercing eyes the subtle movement of the snow. A striped silhouette paused, head raised, sniffing the air. The tactic worked. As one tiger moved away, following the bait's trail, Kuyash seized the opportunity to tighten the remaining snares, creating a deceptive perimeter. She felt the pulse of danger drawing ever closer, the heavy breathing of the animals, which, though inaudible, resonated in her body. The village remained in its deep sleep, the inhabitants oblivious to the silent battle unfolding under the pale moonlight. In the stable, the Yakutian cattle, sensitive to changes in the atmosphere, stirred restlessly, their muffled lowing echoing within the wooden walls. Kuyash felt their anxiety, a deep and ancestral connection that transcended the barrier between species. Her fingers, numb with cold, worked with almost mechanical precision. She used the soft snow to camouflage the snares, creating traps that wouldn't harm, but would entangle, delay, disorient. It was an ancient dance, a ballet of survival where mind triumphed over brute force. A second, more audacious tiger approached the stable, its giant paws leaving deep marks in the snow. Kuyash felt the vibration of its heavy body, the tension of its muscles ready to spring. But before it could attack, the tiger stumbled into one of the snares. It didn't fall, but lost its balance, losing its rhythm. A low growl, inaudible to Kuyash, but felt as a vibration in the ground, echoed. The animal retreated, confused, its hunting instinct momentarily disturbed by the surprise. Kuyash watched, a glint of satisfaction in her tired eyes. The wisdom of the ancestors was being honored. She continued, moving like a shadow among the frozen trees, each movement calculated, each trap a promise of protection. The extreme cold was a constant adversary, but elder Kuyash had faced harsher winters, sharper pains. Her resilience wasn't just a characteristic, it was the essence of her being, forged in a lifetime of challenges. She knew the battle was far from over, but the first silent victory had been won. Eve's life depended on her persistence, and Kuyash would not fail. She was the guardian, the silent weaver of hope, and the Yakutian winter, however cruel, would not break her. The strength of her spirit, unbreakable, was the most potent shield against the icy darkness that approached. Elder Kuyash, feeling the heavy air and the promise of a new attack, raised her gaze to the overcast sky. The moon, though faint, cast long, distorted shadows on the snow, transforming the trees into ghostly figures. She knew that the tiger's intelligence wouldn't allow them to fall for the same tricks for long. Her instincts, sharpened by a lifetime in the wild, told her that the next assault would be different, more coordinated, more desperate. Hunger drove them, and the extreme cold made them relentless. The pain in her joints was a constant companion, a cruel reminder of her age and the body's fragility. Each movement was an effort, a silent groan she felt vibrating in her throat, but which no one else could hear. Her fingers, swollen and stiff, could barely handle the thin reindeer tendons, but the urgency in her chest was a fire burning stronger than any physical discomfort. She needed to think ahead, to anticipate the predator's next move. Like a chess player in a life-or-death game, the vibrations in the ground began to spread, no longer in a semicircle, but in a more direct line towards the stable. The tigers were regrouping, using the darkness and the blizzard as cover. Kuyash felt her heart clench. She needed something more, a barrier that wasn't just a trap, but a real impediment. Her eyes swept the landscape, searching for any element that could be used. It was then that she noticed a small rise in the terrain, a ridge of wind-blown snow just ahead of the stable. It wasn't high, but enough to create a visual and physical obstacle. With a sudden idea, Kuyash began to work with renewed vigor. She used her calloused hands to push and shape the snow, creating small barriers and mounds that, for such a large and heavy animal, would be more than a mere nuisance. She knew that the tigers, accustomed to moving fluidly, would hesitate before irregular and unpredictable terrain, especially if they couldn't clearly see what lay ahead. As she worked, one of the tigers, more cunning than the others, managed to bypass one of the scent traps. Kuyash felt the vibration of its giant paws approaching dangerously close to the perimeter she had established. Her eyes, which saw the world in shades of grey and white, detected a striped blur moving with terrifying speed, almost a smudge in the darkness. The animal was too close, just a few meters from the stable. An icy shiver ran down Kuyash's spine. She couldn't scream, couldn't alert anyone. It was her and her wisdom against the fury of nature. With a final effort, she threw an even stronger-smelling bait, this time directly in the tiger's path, but slightly to the side, guiding it towards one of the newly created snow barriers. The tiger, hungry and with a keen sense of smell, stopped, its body tense, sniffing the air. The distraction worked. It diverted. And the moment it tried to jump the small snow barrier, its weight made it sink a little, unbalancing it. The animal didn't fall, but the hesitation was enough. It retreated, growling, a vibration of frustration that Kuyash felt in her bones. The elder took a deep breath, the icy air burning her lungs. It was a small but crucial victory. She knew that every second gained was more hope for her people. The cattle, inside the stable, remained restless, and Kuyash felt a connection with them, the responsibility to protect them. The night was long, and the battle, far from over, would demand every ounce of her strength and cunning. She was the last barrier, and she would not fail. Suddenly, a new vibration, subtle and unexpected, ran through the frozen ground. It wasn't the heavy drag of a tiger stealthily approaching, but something lighter, more hesitant, coming from the direction of the village. Kuyash froze, her eyes narrowing in the gloom. A different, sharper fear tightened her chest. Her keen senses, accustomed to deciphering the earth's secrets, identified the pattern, small, childish footsteps. A child. Her heart gave a painful leap. It was Lyudmila, her neighbor's granddaughter, a 7-year-old girl with curious eyes and hair as dark as the Yakutian night. Lyudmila, who sometimes followed her like a shadow, fascinated by the elder's stories. What was she doing outside, in the middle of the icy, dangerous night? Kuyash felt panic threatened to overwhelm her, but her hunter's mind prevailed. She couldn't move abruptly, couldn't do anything that might alert the tigers to the girl's presence. The predators, though momentarily disoriented, were still lurking, their vibrations indicating they were regrouping, perhaps irritated by the unexpected resistance. The elder needed to act, but with utmost discretion. Lyudmila, wrapped in a reindeer fur coat that made her look like a small silhouette, emerged from the darkness, her curious eyes sweeping the landscape. She seemed to be looking for something, perhaps drawn by the muffled sounds of the restless cattle that Kuyash couldn't hear. The girl was approaching the defense perimeter, dangerously close to where the tigers prowled. Kuyash felt the intense cold of Yakutia, not just on her skin, but in her soul. The arthritis pain seemed to triple, but she ignored it. Now the battle was not just for the survival of the cattle, but for the innocent life of a child, the future of eBay. She needed to intercept Lyudmila, guide her back to the safety of her cabin without the girl realizing the imminent danger. It was a delicate task, a silent ballet between life and death, where the slightest mistake would be fatal. Kuyash, her body tense and spirit ablaze, began to move, each step calculated not to betray her presence to the tigers, nor to frighten little Lyudmila. Kuyash, her body tense and spirit ablaze, began to move, each step calculated not to betray her presence to the tigers, nor to frighten little Lyudmila. Her eyes, accustomed to the darkness, fixed on the girl's tiny figure, who was now approaching one of the snow barriers Kuyash had erected. The elder felt the ground vibrate with the childish curiosity of Lyudmila's steps, but also with the latent presence of the predators, who seemed to have noticed the new energy in the air. A shiver deeper than the cold ran down her spine. The child's innocence was a glaring vulnerability amidst the night's ferocity. Lyudmila stopped, her large, curious eyes fixed on the stable, from which the muffled sounds of the cattle emanated. She seemed to hesitate, perhaps sensing the strange quietness that preceded danger, or perhaps just the intense cold biting through her clothes. Kuyash needed to act. She couldn't call out to her, couldn't make a sound. It had to be a gentle appearance, a subtle diversion. She moved behind a frozen bush, bending even lower, almost merging with the shadows. With a slow, precise movement, she took from her pocket a small reindeer bone pendant carved with ancient symbols, which she used to soothe children. It had a faint scent of dried herbs, almost imperceptible, but which Lyudmila, with her childish sense of smell, might detect. She cast it carefully, not directly at the girl, but in a gentle arc that would make it fall a few meters from Lyudmila, on a path that would lead her away from the stable and back towards the village. The pendant landed on the soft snow with an almost inaudible sound, but Kuyash felt the vibration of the impact. Lyudmila, as expected, turned her head, her eyes searching for the source of the movement. She saw the dark object in the snow, and with the curiosity typical of her age, began to move towards it. Each step the girl took was a hammer beating in Kuyash's chest. The tiger's vibrations, in turn, seemed to intensify, as if they were scenting the new potential prey. The elder watched, motionless, her muscles tense. She felt the weight of time, the slowness of her body, but her mind was sharper than ever. Lyudmila picked up the pendant, her small fingers wrapping around the cold bone. A faint smile appeared on her lips, and she looked around as if searching for who had left it there. Kuyash remained hidden, praying that the girl wouldn't see her, wouldn't make a sound. The plan was for the pendant, with its familiar and comforting scent, to lead her back home, away from danger. But Lyudmila's innocence was also her unpredictability. Instead of following the path back, the girl, pendant in hand, began to approach the stable even closer, perhaps wanting to show her find to the cattle, or simply drawn by the promise of something more interesting. Kuyash felt an icy despair. The tigers were closer now, the vibrations of their heavy bodies almost continuous. She detected the movement of one of them, a striped silhouette creeping from behind a woodpile, positioning itself for an attack. The elder knew there was no more time for subtleties. She needed to create a bigger distraction, something that would drive the tigers away and at the same time alert Lyudmila without frightening her too much. With a swift movement, Kuyash grabbed a small leather pouch full of stones and threw it with all her might against a distant tree in the opposite direction from the stable and the girl. The impact was a dry, muffled sound, but enough to create a strong vibration in the ground, a resonance that the tigers, with their keen senses, would certainly feel. The predators, surprised, stopped. Kuyash felt the sudden interruption of their vibrations, followed by a redirection of their attention to the unexpected sound. Lyudmila, startled by the sudden noise and the vibration in the ground, dropped the pendant. Her eyes wide, she looked in the direction of the sound, then at the stable, and finally at the surrounding darkness. Fear began to manifest on her face. Kuyash seized the moment. She emerged from the shadows, not running, but with a swift, determined walk, extending her hand to the girl. Her eyes, full of a silent urgency, communicated the need to follow. Lyudmila, seeing the elder, didn't cry. She just ran to her, clinging to her fur coat. Kuyash hugged her tightly, feeling the child's fragile warmth against her own. The tiger's vibrations were moving away, drawn by the distraction. The elder, with Lyudmila in her arms, began to move away from the stable, guiding the girl back to the village. Each step a silent prayer, each beat of her heart an oath of protection. The night was still long, but Lyudmila's life was, for now, safe. Elder Kuyash, with the child nestled in her arms, felt the weight of responsibility, but also the unwavering strength of love. Kuyash held Lyudmila close, feeling the small body tremble, not just from cold, but from a newfound fear. The elder's steps were slow but firm, each one an act of will against the throbbing pain in her knees and the weariness that weighed on her shoulders. She felt the tiger's vibrations receding, but knew the calm was temporary. Hunger was a persistent enemy, and they would return. Her focus was now on the girl. Lyudmila wasn't crying, but her face was pale, her wide eyes fixed on Kuyash's chest. The elder tried to convey calm through her touch, stroking the child's dark hair with a gloved hand. The village seemed a sleeping ghost under the faint moonlight, each cabin a promise of warmth and security. As she approached Lyudmila's small house, Kuyash hesitated. How to deliver her without waking the family, without causing unnecessary panic? She approached the wooden door, pushing it gently. It was unlocked, as was customary in Ib, where trust was the foundation of the community. Lyudmila slipped from Kuyash's arms, her small feet touching the cold floor of the entrance. She looked at the elder with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. Kuyash, with a gentle, silent smile, pointed inside, towards the warmth emanating from the home. The girl understood. With a last look at the elder, Lyudmila entered, disappearing into the cozy darkness. Kuyash closed the door with the same care, the muffled sound a relief to her heart. A heavy sigh escaped Kuyash's lips, the vapor freezing in the air. The mission to protect Lyudmila had been accomplished, but the greater battle still awaited her. The elder felt exhaustion descend upon her, a weight that threatened to bend her. Her muscles screamed, her bones ached, and the cold seemed to penetrate to her marrow. But the image of the restless cattle in the stable, the promise of survival for her people, was a beacon in her darkness. She could not fail. Ib's life depended on her silent vigil. The vibrations in the ground, previously distant, began to return, more cautious, more dispersed. The tigers were circling again, testing the limits, looking for a breach. Kuyash felt the cunning intelligence of the predators, the cold patience that made them so dangerous. They had learned from the traps and distractions, and the next assault would be even more calculated. The elder raised her gaze to the sky, where the stars, like icy diamonds, shone indifferent to the struggle unfolding below. A wave of loneliness washed over her. No one in the village knew of the imminent danger, of the silent battle she was fighting alone. It was a heavy burden, but Kuyash carried it with the dignity of one who knew her purpose. She was the guardian, the bridge between life and death, and her deafness, which isolated her from the world of sounds, connected her even more deeply to the earth's vibrations, to the silent whispers of danger. With a monumental effort, Kuyash turned, her eyes fixed in the direction of the stable. The path back seemed longer, more arduous. Each step was a small victory. She remembered the stories of her ancestors, hunters who faced even harsher winters, even more fearsome beasts, always with wisdom and resilience as their greatest weapons. They didn't have the brute strength of animals, but they had intelligence, patience, and an unbreakable spirit. Kuyash was the embodiment of that heritage. As she approached the stable's perimeter, she felt the new vibrations of the tigers, now more concentrated at one point. They had found a weakness, a place where the snow barriers were less dense. The elder felt a pang of frustration, but not despair. It was a challenge, and she was ready to face it. Her fingers, though stiff, began to work again, searching for the reindeer tendons in her pouch. She needed to reinforce the defense, create new distractions, deceive the predators once more. The cutting cold was a constant reminder of the urgency. The cattle, inside, continued to low softly, a sound Kuyash couldn't hear, but whose vibration she felt in her feet, a melody of life she had sworn to protect. She was the silent weaver of hope, and the Yakutian winter, however cruel, would not break her. The strength of her spirit, unbreakable, was the most potent shield against the icy darkness that approached, and she was ready to continue her fight, 1 second, 1 minute, 1 hour at a time, until dawn brought a new day of hope for Ib. Kuyash, her mind clear despite the exhaustion, felt the urgency of the situation. The tigers, with their feline intelligence, had detected the weakness. She knelt in the snow, her knees protesting, and began to examine the area. The snow ridge she had shaped earlier was now slightly compromised, a spot where the wind and perhaps the brushing of one of the predators had lessened its density. It wasn't an obvious flaw, but to the tiger's keen senses, it was an entryway. The elder pulled the reindeer tendons from her pouch, her stiff fingers working with a precision that age and cold could not erase. She needed something more resilient, something that couldn't be easily knocked down. Her eyes swept the ground, searching for the elements that Yakutia's nature offered her. Small, frozen branches, ice-covered stones, anything that could be used to strengthen the barrier. She began to interweave the tendons into an improvised net, fixing it in the denser snow and embedding branches and stones to create a firmer structure. It was slow, painful work, each movement a test of her endurance. With each piece of branch she fitted, she felt the tiger's vibrations intensify. They were approaching again, the frustration in their movements almost palpable through the ground. Kuyash could feel the predator's impatience, the hunger that drove them to risk more. One of them, the same cunning tiger from before, seemed to be testing the reinforced barrier. The elder felt the soft impact of its paw against the snow, an attempt to push, to find a passage. She remained motionless, her breath shallow, waiting. The tiger retreated but did not give up. Instead, the vibrations indicated it was circling, looking for another weak point, or perhaps preparing a more coordinated attack. Kuyash knew she couldn't just defend. She needed to disorient them again, make them doubt their own intelligence. She remembered an ancient tactic used by her ancestors to hunt large animals, creating a labyrinth of scents and sounds, vibrations in her case, that would confuse the predator, making it expend energy and time on a futile chase. With a new purpose, she took a small leather pouch containing dried herbs and moss, soaked in a strong scent of smoked meat. It was a powerful bait, but one she used sparingly, so as not to attract other animals or habituate the tigers. She began to scatter small handfuls of the material in a zigzag pattern, moving away from the stable towards a more open area where the terrain was uneven and the shadows were denser. Each handful was placed with precision, creating a trail that seemed to lead to easy prey, but which would actually lead them away. The tiger's vibrations changed. They had perceived the new scent, and the elder felt their hesitation, their curiosity. One of the tigers, the boldest, began to follow the trail, its heavy paws sinking into the snow as it moved away from the stable. The others followed, more cautious, but equally drawn by the promise of food. Kuyash watched, or rather felt, the predators moving away, her heart beating with a mixture of relief and weariness. The tactic had worked for now, but she knew the night was still young and the tiger's cunning had no limits. The elder rose with difficulty, her aching muscles crying out for rest. She felt the cold freeze her silent tears, but she did not allow weakness to overcome her. With each victory, however small, she felt the strength of her ancestors flow through her veins, a reminder that resilience was the true weapon against adversity. She needed to prepare for the next assault, which would come with the certainty of a storm. The cattle inside the stable were still restless, but the vibration of their movement seemed less frantic. They sensed the decrease in immediate danger, Kuyash's silent guard. The elder, with a last look at the starry sky, where the promise of a new day seemed distant, began to patrol the perimeter again, her steps firm, her spirit unbreakable, the embodiment of hope for Ebe. Kuyash leaned against the stable wall, the cold wood penetrating her clothes. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, searching in her memory for the stories of her ancestors, the strength they found in the darkest moments. The loneliness was overwhelming, but the responsibility for Ebe, for every life in that village, was a fire burning in her chest, keeping her warm against the relentless winter. She was the last line of defense, and she would not yield. The fight would continue until dawn, until the sun, with its promise of life, drove away the shadows of the night and the hungry predators. The vibrations in the ground returned, more intense and coordinated this time. Kuyash felt a shiver run through her tired body. The tigers had learned. They wouldn't disperse easily. She detected the approach of several of them, their movements heavy and decisive, as if they had devised a plan. The elder opened her eyes, the darkness of the night seeming even deeper. She felt the predator's hunger, a primal desperation that made them relentless. They were no longer testing the snow barriers or the stable wall. The vibrations indicated they were focusing on one point, the main door, made of thicker logs, but also the entry and exit point, and therefore the most vulnerable. Kuyash felt the impact of a massive body against the door, followed by another and another. The tigers were attacking in unison, a brutal and coordinated force that threatened to breach the barn's last defense. A low groan escaped Kuyash's lips. Her muscles screamed, exhaustion pulled her to the ground, but the image of Lyudmila, of the cattle, of the entire village depending on her, propelled her. She needed a final tactic, something that would drive them away once and for all, without violence, without bloodshed. Her eyes swept the area, searching for inspiration. What would her ancestors do when strength failed and cunning seemed insufficient? She remembered an ancient legend told on cold Yakutian nights about a hunter who, cornered by a pack of wolves, used the cold and ice itself to his advantage. Kuyash felt the vibration of the door logs, creaking dangerously. There was no time. She moved with renewed urgency, her agile fingers searching in her pouch for the last of her resources, a small amount of dried pepper powder and a handful of small, sharp stones. With a swift and precise movement, Kuyash threw the stones onto the ground, right in front of the door, creating a sharp, dispersed vibration that resembled small ice cracks. At the same time, she cast the pepper powder in a low arc, aiming for the height of the tiger's muzzles. She couldn't see them clearly in the darkness, but she felt their presence, the proximity of their bodies. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The tiger's vibrations stopped abruptly. Kuyash felt their confusion, their surprise. Then came a series of frantic movements, scratches on the ground and muffled growls, not of anger, but of discomfort. The pepper powder, harmless but irritating, had hit their sensitive muzzles, and the vibrations of the stones on the ice had disoriented them. They retreated, shaking their heads, their paws dragging in the snow. Kuyash remained motionless, her breath shallow, feeling the tiger's vibrations receding, faster this time, more determined to abandon the hunt. They had been repelled, not by force, but by intelligence and cunning. The elder felt a wave of relief so great that her legs almost gave way. She leaned against the door again, feeling that the logs, though shaken, were still firm. The silence that followed was not the oppressive silence from before, but a silence of victory, of temporary peace. The vibrations of the cattle inside began to calm, their movements softer, as if they sensed the danger had passed. Kuyash raised her gaze to the sky. A faint lightness began to appear on the eastern horizon, a silver thread announcing the arrival of dawn. The fight was over, and Ibi would survive another day. Kuyash felt the weight of the world lift from her shoulders, replaced by an overwhelming exhaustion, but also by a profound peace. Her legs, once stiff and aching, now felt like lead, barely supporting her. She slowly slid to the icy ground, leaning her back against the barn door, feeling the cold wood against her fur coat. Her body trembled, no longer from fear or intense cold, but from a relief that completely enveloped her. Her eyes, once fixed on the darkness, now watched the horizon line tint with soft shades of pink and orange, the harbinger of a new day. The sun, still hidden, already spread its promise of warmth and light over the frozen landscape. The vibrations of the cattle inside the barn were now a calm murmur, a soft bleating that Kuyash felt in her feet, a melody of life and safety. They were safe. Ibi was safe. That thought was balm for every ache, for every exhausted muscle. She closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of rest, of pure gratitude. In her mind, she saw the faces of Lyudmila, of the other elders, of the mothers and fathers, of the hunters who depended on provisions to feed their families. They slept, oblivious to the silent battle she had fought on their behalf. And that was how it should be. Her heroism didn't need applause, only the certainty that her people would continue to live. The elder felt the first warm breeze of dawn touch her face, a welcome and revitalizing contrast to the night's cutting cold. She opened her eyes again, and the world seemed to be reborn before her. The village's contours, once mere shadows, now defined themselves with clarity. Smoke began to rise from the chimneys, the first vibrations of hurried footsteps and muffled voices, indicating that Ibi was beginning to awaken. She rose with a muffled groan, each movement a struggle against the stiffness of her limbs. She needed to return to her cabin before anyone saw her, before the silence of her vigil was broken by curiosity or concern. Her steps were slow, but determined, as she moved away from the barn, leaving behind the improvised barricade and the tracks in the snow, silent witnesses to her night of struggle. As she passed the first houses, she felt the vibrations of children playing, of pots being prepared for breakfast. A wave of tenderness washed over her. This was why she fought. It was for these small, daily miracles that she faced winter, loneliness, and beasts. Her deafness, which separated her from the world's sound, connected her even more deeply to its essence, to the vibrations of the earth and the heart of her people. Upon reaching her cabin, Kuyash pushed open the wooden door, stepping into the cozy warmth. She took off her heavy fur coat, hanging it carefully. Her eyes swept the small space, familiar and welcoming. She sat on her wooden bench, feeling the warmth of the fire that still faintly glowed in the hearth. The exhaustion was immense, but her soul was light. She had fulfilled her promise, honored her ancestors. The ancient wisdom, the resilience of spirit, the unwavering connection to the earth, all of it had manifested in her that night. She allowed herself to smile, a tired but deeply genuine smile. The sunlight, now stronger, filtered through the small window, painting the packed earth floor with golden patterns. Ibi was safe. Winter was still long and cruel, but the village had survived another threat, thanks to its silent guardian. Kuyash closed her eyes again, but this time a restorative sleep awaited her, a sleep without nightmares, filled with the certainty that the miracle of survival in Yakutia was forged each day by the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. Hours later, the sunlight already filled her cabin, painting the packed earth floor with a golden, inviting glow. Kuyash awoke slowly, feeling the warmth of the fire that still crackled in the hearth, a sound she didn't hear, but whose gentle vibration she felt in the air. The weariness of the previous night still weighed on her limbs, but a sense of lightness and peace nestled in her chest. She sat up, stretching her arms and legs with a soft groan, feeling every muscle protest, but also give thanks for the well-deserved rest. Through the window, she watched the village awaken, the vibrations in the ground a constant rhythm of life. Children ran, their laughter muffled by the cabin's isolation, but visible in their joyful, carefree movements. Women carried buckets of water, their steps firm in the snow. Men prepared the reindeer for the day's tasks, their robust silhouettes against the white landscape. Smoke from the chimneys rose in white spirals against the clear blue sky, a visible sign that warmth and life pulsed in every home. Ebe was vibrant, and she, Kuyash, had been the silent guardian of that life, once again. A light tap on the door made her turn her head. Lyudmila, the young mother whose smile was a ray of sunshine on the darkest days, stood there, holding a steaming bowl. Her brown eyes, full of concern and affection, met Kuyash's. Lyudmila didn't need words. Her gesture of offering food was a universal language of care and affection. "Grandma Kuyash," Lyudmila murmured, and Kuyash read the movement of her lips, perceiving the tenderness in her gaze. "I brought hot broth. You look tired." Kuyash smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her face, marked by time and harsh weather. She accepted the bowl, feeling the comforting warmth through her gloved and stiff hands. That broth, simple and nourishing, was more than food. It was a symbol of human connection, of the silent gratitude that united the village. She nodded in thanks, her eyes conveying all her affection and the peace she felt. Lyudmila sat beside her, saying nothing more, just sharing the cabin's quietness and warmth. There was no need to explain the night of danger, the beasts. Lyudmila, like many in the village, felt Kuyash's protective presence, the ancestral wisdom that emanated from her. Even without understanding the extent of her sacrifices, she knew that the elder was Ebe's rock, the invisible guardian who wove hope into every dawn, a constant and reliable presence. Kuyash felt the young woman's presence like a warm embrace, soothing her soul. That moment of sharing, of understanding silence, was the true reward. It wasn't public recognition she sought, nor praise, but the certainty that life would continue, that Ebe's children would have a safe future full of possibilities. Later, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Kuyash stepped out of the cabin, feeling the fresh, invigorating morning air. She walked slowly towards the barn, her eyes sweeping the perimeter with her usual vigilance. The improvised wood barricade was still there, and the tigers' deep tracks in the snow were visible, though the icy wind was already subtly beginning to erase them. No one seemed to have noticed the extent of the silent battle that had taken place there. The barn door was intact, the logs firm and secure. The cattle inside lowed softly, a sound of contentment that she felt vibrating in the ground, an echo of life. Kuyash touched the cold wood of the barn, a feeling of pride and duty fulfilled, completely flooding her. The Yakutian winter was a relentless enemy, a constant test, but the resilience of the human spirit was even stronger, more enduring. She had proven it again, with her cunning and courage. The village of Ebe, with its courageous people and unbreakable spirit, would continue to prosper. A miracle forged each day, with each challenge overcome through unity. She raised her gaze to the vast blue sky, where the sun shone with an intensity that promised a day of renewed hope. Kuyash felt the strength of her ancestors flow through her veins, a legacy of wisdom and courage that she carried with pride. Life in Yakutia was a constant test of endurance, but it was also a celebration of connection, family, and the altruism that kept everyone united. And for Kuyash, Ebe's silent guardian, this was the most beautiful of melodies, the deepest of truths. She was the embodiment of hope, and her invisible struggle, fought in the freezing darkness, was the solid foundation upon which the village's future would be built, an eternal testament to the strength of the human spirit. Kuyash felt the village's pulse in every fiber of her being, a silent symphony of life manifesting in the ground's vibrations. The dawn, which she had secured with her tireless vigil, brought with it renewed energy. Eve's children, with their laughter she didn't hear but felt in the lightness of their hurried steps, played in the soft snow, building small forts and snowmen. Their small, agile hands, wrapped in fur mittens, were a constant reminder of the fragility and beauty of the life she protected. Lyudmila, with her gentle smile and expressive eyes, passed Kuyash's cabin, carrying buckets of water from the communal well. She waved to the elder, a simple gesture, yet laden with respect and affection. Kuyash returned it with a nod and a discreet smile. There was no need for words. The connection was deeper, woven into the fabric of daily life and the silent understanding of sacrifices. The elder watched Lyudmila go her way, her steps firm in the snow, an image of strength and motherhood that warmed her heart, echoing the resilience she personified. The village men, in their heavy coats and with axes in hand, prepared for another day of work in the forest, seeking firewood to keep their homes warm. Kuyash felt the vibrations of their coordinated movements, the determination in each strike that echoed in the frozen earth. They were Eve's visible strength, the arm that provided and built, while she was the invisible guardian, the mind that anticipated and protected. This division of roles, forged over generations, was the essence of survival in Yakutia, a harmonious dance between the visible and the felt. The scent of wood smoke, which she couldn't smell but imagined from the warmth emanating from the chimneys, filled the icy air. It was the scent of life, of comfort, of hope. Kuyash walked slowly towards the barn again, not to check the traps or the tiger's tracks, which the wind was already beginning to subtly erase, but to touch the cold wood, to reaffirm her connection with what she had protected. The wood barricade she had stacked the previous night was still there, a silent reminder of the battle fought, now covered by a thin layer of fresh snow. As she touched the barn door, Kuyash felt the gentle vibrations of the cattle inside, a murmur of contentment that filled her with peace. They were safe, warm, and fed. It was for these moments, for this sense of duty fulfilled, that she faced every winter, every threat. Her deafness, which might once have been seen as a weakness, had transformed into a gift, sharpening her other senses and uniquely connecting her to the earth's rhythm, to Iba's vital pulse. She raised her gaze to the vast blue sky, where the sun shone with an intensity that promised a clear, though still icy, day. The distant mountains, covered by an immaculate white mantle, seemed silent guardians of the village, witnesses to countless winters and human tenacity. Kuyash felt the strength of her ancestors flow through her veins, not as a burden, but as an unbreakable current that linked her to the past and the future. A legacy of wisdom and courage that she carried with pride, a flame that would never extinguish. Life in Yakutia was a constant test of endurance, but it was also, and perhaps primarily, a celebration of connection, family, and the altruism that kept everyone united. For Kuyash, Ibe's silent guardian, this was the most beautiful of melodies, the deepest of truths. She didn't need sounds to understand the community's harmony, to feel the love that permeated every gesture, every glance. Her invisible struggle, fought in the freezing darkness, had reinforced the solid foundation upon which the village's future would be built. With a soft sigh, which turned into a small cloud of vapor in the icy air, Kuyash turned to face the village. Every cabin, every rising smoke, every vibration of life she felt beneath her feet was an eternal testament to the strength of the human spirit. Winter was still long, but Iba, under her silent guard, would flourish, And she, Elder Kuyash, would be there, feeling every beat of her people's heart, ready for another day, another miracle of survival.